Everyone has been wounded. Whether you endured bullying from childhood classmates or you were psychologically, physically, or sexually abused by an authority figure, you were wounded and you may still carry those wounds with you. Whether you were blamed for something you didn't do, or after all these many years you're still ashamed about something you did, the blame and the shame may still feel as heavy as it ever did. Whether your love was rejected and someone simply walked out of your life, or you carry feelings of abandonment over the death of a loved one, it may have happened years ago, but the wounds deep within your soul are as raw as ever. And if there is a word to describe you, it is broken. We all carry wounds from our past, and we are all broken. That's what this morning's story is about. It's about Jesus' encounter with someone who was spiritually wounded and broken. He and his disciples were on their way back to Galilee after having attended Passover in Jerusalem. And while the quickest route was through Samaria, most self-respecting Jews were willing to add a day onto their journey if it meant avoiding the region believed to be inhabited by unclean people. But Jesus seemed to have his mind set. And it's almost as if he had an appointment with someone. And as it turns out, he did. He had a divine appointment with someone who was weighed down by wounds from her past. She arrived in the heat of the day. She preferred the heat of the midday sun to the cold shoulder of her neighbors, who already would have drawn their water in the early morning hours when it was cooler. Sometimes she received silent treatment, and sometimes she was the target of whispered gossip, and sometimes she was the victim of hateful words meant to put her in her place. She knew her place, all right. She had been married 5 times, and the man with whom she currently lived wasn't her husband. Some would call her unlucky. Others called her cursed by God for past sins. And still others labeled her as a woman of ill repute, someone of low moral standards. But there's every reason to believe that 1 or 2 of her husbands may have died. Another couple may have divorced her when they discovered that she was unable to conceive. And there's every reason to believe that the man she was living with wasn't some bum shacking up with her, but maybe the brother of one of her former husbands, someone who was bound by something called levirate law to provide for her welfare. There's no reason to assume she was a tramp, as many male theologians through the centuries have done. The conversation between her and Jesus started out innocently enough, sort of the way you might begin a conversation about the weather with a stranger, except theirs was a nice chat about water. I sure am thirsty. Could you give me a drink, please? You're asking for water from me, a Samaritan? Oh, I have water, living water that will never leave you thirsty. And back and forth it went, with Jesus predictably speaking in metaphors and the other person just as predictably taking his words literally. Until the conversation took a sudden, unpredictable turn when Jesus asked about her marital status. It's almost as if Jesus decided to cut to the chase when he said, Go call your husband. It's as if he deliberately touched her most painful wound because he knew that her deepest desire was to be seen, but it was also her deepest fear. That's how it is with all of us. We want to be able to tell our story without fear or shame, but telling our story is also our deepest fear. We are terrified of being fully seen, and some of us, most of us, live in fear that someone will know us so well that they will uncover the wounds of our past, wounds that others have inflicted on us, or wounds that we have inflicted on ourselves, or both. I'm certain this is what was happening in our story because you see how artfully she changed the subject when Jesus got too close to her pain. As quickly as Jesus had changed the subject to her marital status, she just as quickly shifted it to theology, asking Jesus where he thought people should worship. We do that, don't we? We become skilled at avoiding the pain of our past by shifting the conversation away from it. And we do it for the same reason as this woman did it. Because when people know our full story, it has been our experience that they will use it against us. The Christian church has notoriously used the truth about who we are and who we love as a weapon to be used against us. But when Jesus revealed her truth, he didn't use it as a weapon. And I believe when he told her story, he spoke softly and compassionately. He did it not to define her by her past, but to demonstrate that nothing about her story disqualified her from God's love. This conversation between Jesus and this woman was the longest conversation between him and another person recorded in any of the Gospels. And it was with a woman, a Samaritan woman. A Samaritan woman with a past that had been weaponized against her. And this Samaritan woman with a past that had been weaponized against her was the first person within the Gospel of John to whom Jesus revealed his own truth, his story, his identity. Not the Pharisees, not the Jewish leaders, not even the disciples, but her. For the first time in her life, her story had been told in such a way that she experienced liberation instead of shame. And she couldn't wait to tell the villagers about her encounter with Jesus. But there's an important detail in this account that is easily missed if we aren't paying attention. She left her jar at the well. Now, it may just mean that in all of her excitement, she forgot all about the jar and would return later to get it. Or maybe the gospel writer was using the water jar as a metaphor of her spiritual wounds. Wounds that she had carried for so many years. Wounds that she could now leave behind because now she was a theologian and evangelist, not in spite of her story, but because of it. I wonder if the same might be true for you and me. I wonder if we were willing to be vulnerable enough to allow God to gently touch our wounds, if we were open to being fully known, that it might not result in shame, but in a calling. What if our truth were lifted up as a gift instead of used as a weapon against us? Jesus didn't correct the woman and say she needed to be better or more than who she was. Jesus does not correct identities, but meets us where we are. Today's text insists that God's love doesn't wait for us to be less complicated, less visible, or less ourselves. We are loved in a "for God so loved the world" kind of love, and used by God as we are, not in spite of who we are. And that is good news worth embracing and sharing with others. Amen.